an island on the rim of the world, in that space between slate, sea and sky, where air and ocean currents are plays of wild energy, and the light changes everything.
My grandfather and older members of family have worked in the quarries when they were opened as well, so I often heard stories, and it was always kind of part of the, just part of the landscape around, hearing stories, and a big part of growing up, I think, and especially in Cullerpool in this end, the quarries are still so prominent. The slate walls, the slate roofs, yes, it was a big part of growing up, and I think a part of your identity in Luing, that you know a lot about the slates. And I think, I don't think maybe enough folk in Scotland do know that it was such a prominent industry here in the West Coast, and the islands here in the West Coast.
Luing is one of the Slate Islands. Cullerpool itself is just one of the areas where we quarried on Luing. And in fact, although Luing may have had slate quarrying from about the 13th century, perhaps even earlier, on a small scale, it didn't start onto an industrial scale until the middle of the 18th century. And even then, Cullerpool might not have been opened until later in the 18th century and over the start of the 19th century. I think that the quarries were a vital part of the whole island. There would have been small-scale farming and fishing, but it was the slate quarrying that most of the men worked in, and it was the slate quarrying cottages that most of the population lived in.
I remember well in the 60s as a young boy, hard to believe, when the quarry was working, the activity and the slates going away. So it was a much bigger thing then, but it would be wonderful to have production back in a manageable scale. It would be good.
So we've always been aware, obviously, that there was a heritage of slating here on Luing and on the other Slate Islands. And over the past 3 years, we've been working with Highlands Enterprise to look at how we can re-establish the exploitation of traditional materials in Argyll. And Luing was an obvious place to look and see what was possible, given the history here. So partnering with Highlands Enterprise, we came to Luing and initiated a discussion with the community trust here, who expressed an interest in maybe establishing a slate enterprise that would complement the life on the island today. Scottish slate has a particular characteristic, a particular aesthetic, and there's a particular skill involved in using it and laying it to maintain the tradition of Scottish roofing. So there's a desperate need from it from a cultural heritage perspective to maintain the historic built environment. But one of the things that attracts us to this project is we think there's also an opportunity for traditional materials to underpin local economies and help local communities thrive in a sustainable way.
As part of the Trust, we've been looking at ways to look at some of the problems the island is facing, like many other islands these days, with depopulation and economic issues. So we're just exploring avenues to ways we could provide a sustainability for the island and its own economy and reverse the depopulation and encourage people to come and live and work here. It would provide a natural resource for the local area that's lacking at the moment. There's lots of places that are going to need to be re-roofed, and they could be roofed with natural slate that doesn't have the environmental impact of slate that's imported from all around the world. And again, it's doing that local sustainability and trying to enlarge the community here.
Delfinity were engaged by Highlands and Islands Enterprise on behalf of the Isle of Luing Community Trust to do a feasibility study to see if we could restart potentially the slate extraction and processing industry on Luing, which is one of the historic slate islands.
So the purpose of today is, first of all, to inform, is to explain where we are in the process, and it's to ask people about what benefits they might see from having this kind of potential funds flow and what their main concerns are about having reopening of the slate quarries in this village. One of the great things about having that as a community-owned and managed enterprise is that those benefits would be by the community, of the community and for the community, would retain them in the community rather than losing them elsewhere if a third party came in.
So the benefits of the project for the community would be the ability to have a long-term sustainable income that could be used to be invested in other projects and other benefits for the island. On top of that, there are potentially up to 6 jobs that will be created in an area that has been historically depopulating. I mean, I think the thing that surprised us when we were initially engaged to do the project, I think it's fair to say we were slightly sceptical about it. However, the research that we've done to date and the analysis that we've done to date was pleasantly surprising, and in terms of the information that we have so far, it does look as if it would be genuinely a sustainable and economically viable project.
HIE support communities in our fragile islands around Argyll to generate social impacts, economic impacts, so that they have a chance of achieving financial sustainability going forward. So we're keen to look at ways by which they can take charge of their future themselves and become more economically prosperous, I suppose, around jobs, housing. The biggest challenge is depopulation. So holding on to their population, particularly younger families, because if you hold on to young families, your schools are maintained, etc. And that is the biggest challenge by far of all our islands, not just Luing. The quarry was last in operation in 1962, so it's been closed for decades. But when you look at the extent of material there, with a bit of capital investment, it's certainly feasible to open it up again. The next stage has to be to look at the detail of that, look at further feasibility of that, maybe do a bit more detailed business planning and some trialling of that to establish the quality of the material and the exact extent of it. But there's certainly a real opportunity for local people to benefit from the resource that's on their doorstep there.
It's so important that we talk to the community consistently and constantly about what the proposal is. We haven't, it's right at the early stage, but everybody knows what the possibilities are and what the problems are and can make an informed decision on it.
Obviously HES is the lead national body for the historic environment, but we're very conscious that any development around a contentious issue like quarrying and materials production, the community has to be totally on board. And especially here on Luing, it's vital that it's a community-led enterprise so that we maximise the benefit to the community. Historically, we built the environment we see around us today. We built it from the resources that were near at hand, that were locally available. They were exploited and manufactured using local skills and supported local employment and local economies. And we think we could learn something from that past in Scotland and use it to contribute towards the future of sustainable development.
Even sort of in my lifetime, there's been quite a decline in younger families living here. A lot of my generation have grown up and not a huge amount have returned. Just with the kind of problems with work locally, cost of living here, cost of ferry, because the majority of folk who live here travel off the island for work. So you've got to factor that into any job that you're looking at on the mainland, that you're going to have quite high travel costs. And then the fact of a lack of appropriate and affordable housing for young folk.
This is a small-scale Slate project, but I think it would provide jobs, which is so important for this island. The population here has been declining for many years, and it's only really since last November that we've had new people moving into the village. 6 new people have moved into Cullepo village since last November, which is really important.
We have done a lot as a community to protect ourselves in the past, but we have to do something different. Global warming, especially sea level rise, is going to become increasingly difficult to manage. You can't protect everything, but we can mitigate the damage here. The Slate Quarry is a brilliant opportunity to have material that we have available and put it on the shore to protect it.
Quite bad weather during January, February time of the year. It impacts on the coastal erosion quite badly. So that's something that we can try and cover, maybe with the spoils from the quarrying practices being pushed back down to try and stem that flow of coastal erosion.
Oh, I'm all for it. I think if it's going to bring more young people to the island and more houses, that's great. Well, I think it'd be very good for the island if it, if people didn't have to leave the island, youngsters, for a living. It'd be good if more of them could stay. That would be my biggest thing.
It's just nice to be able to talk about it and also see the plans of the quarry, how the quarry itself might be kind of exploited. So of course there's a question about just how you would make a project like this kind of work without it placing too much burden, so that it actually creates kind of as many benefits as the investment that's required, because it's a lot of investment to make and to keep things going.
The potential of the Slate quarrying reopening is it's an opportunity to showcase how big a part the Gaelic language was of the Slate Island communities. Gaelic was the language of the quarry. Gaelic was the language of the home. It was such a strong, prominent factor. It was just the way of life here, right up, until the mid-50s, early 60s, when the quarries closed. And when people left the island, the language declined, and there's very few Gaelic speakers left in any of the Slate Islands.
The island, it's not all a museum. It's a working island. We need to have younger people here to take us into the future.